My name's Claire Callison, and I'm the Maddie's Canine Life-Saving Advisor, so I work for American Pets Alive here in Austin. I teach 3 of our dog-focused apprenticeships, so a Canine Life-Saving Masterclass. It's an intensive, everything from intake all the way to adoption and afterwards. And then a Matchmaker apprenticeship, really focused on proactive adoption placements. And then a volunteer dog handling apprenticeship, so how to build your army of volunteers. Prior to coming to Austin, I worked in San Antonio. I first started at Animal Care Services there for about 2 or 3 years, and then moved to San Antonio Pets Alive when that was formed as the Director of Operations. So you guys have been learning a lot of exciting things about what's going on here in Austin. San Antonio has been a pretty tough city. It still is. An intake about 31,000 a year. When I first started, only a 28% live release rate. So this really hits close to home for me. This was my everyday, and so a lot of these things are just lessons I've kind of learned along the way, and also lessons I've learned from what you all are doing in your shelters, and hopefully in a concise presentation. And if you have any questions for me, if I don't have time at the end, I'll make sure that you have my email so you can contact me, and I'll be here the whole weekend. All right, so this is my little infomercial pitch for you all. Does any of this sound familiar? I think everyone can relate to these things. Every day your kennels are full, right? And then you've got more cats and dogs just flowing in every single day, and you can't really keep your head above water. I know you can probably relate. You're here at this conference, you're hearing all these exciting programs and initiatives you can do, and I think in the back of your mind you're probably thinking, I don't even have enough staff or time in the day to do everything that I need to do, let alone like launch a whole new program. Like, who's gonna do that? So totally relate to you there. Here's my infomercial pitch. So do you want to increase your live release rate? Increase your rescue impact to save more lives. So if you are a rescue organization and you know your county or your city shelter is really struggling, but I really want to help them, but we're just always full. How can I get that turnover happening faster? And then how can I decrease my length of stay for some of the dogs and cats in my care? Because we know every day that they're in a kennel is another life that you can't save. And of course, we've talked a lot about shelter stress and decline that happens with both dogs and cats when they're in your shelter for so long. So I'm pitching it to you. I think everyone says yes. We heard a lot of really good things this morning about innovative RTO strategies, so how to even stop them from coming in your door, but also how do you get them home. So that, we can't have one or the other, right? So that one paired with fast flow through. So say everything is kind of failed, so you can't get them to not bring them in, and you haven't been able to find an owner, but you're using all your innovative tools that you've learned this weekend. They're in your care. So we have to have both. We have to have fast flow through, but we also have to have really innovative RTO strategies. So this presentation is going to focus of more like, I did everything, here they are in my kennel, what can I do to move them out faster? The foundation of all of these things, so we want to do all these things, but the bottom line is they've got to just move through faster. So a little checklist for you all. You've heard a lot about urgency this weekend. This is so important to have a culture of urgency. I think this sounds familiar, where a rescue coordinator that maybe knows, euthanasia lists and life and death. I need to open 10 kennels today. Somehow I've got to get 10 dogs or 10 cats out to rescue. You know that feeling, right? That urgency that you've got. Your director of operations, or if you're a shelter manager, you're running lists every day of your inventory and trying to play Tetris of the open kennels and how can you maximize saving lives. Or even if you've had to have the unfortunate job of doing the euthanasias yourself and feeling that pain that goes into it, and just feeling like, oh, if we only had an outlet, if we only had one more partner. I think we've all been a little frustrated. We can all probably think of a coworker or a volunteer that we wish was moving as fast as we were mentally, right? Like, why are you on the phone, or why are you kind of hanging out and playing on Facebook, and here I am making life and death decisions every day. So it's so important that even if they don't have a direct impact in terms of actually making the decision of opening space, or who goes to rescue, who's going to foster, who's getting adopted, they might be a vet tech, or your volunteer coordinator, or an education outreach coordinator, or an adoption counselor. It's so important that those people are working every day with that sense of urgency and really adopting this every second counts mentality. It seems crazy, like, oh, it's just another day. But I think of it not even in days anymore, but hours and even into minutes. So everything has to be working very quickly because every second counts to be saving lives. So how do you do that, right? One of the things that we have really worked on is making sure that staff, it doesn't come just with like an email to them, but they understand that it's not just like flowing from a director, but they actually understand why there's this urgency. When we look at the numbers, you guys have been like overwhelmed with data this weekend, but when we look at the numbers, it's pretty simple when you look at kind of just what needs to happen. But pets need to leave as fast or faster, ideally, than they have historically been euthanized. So if you take a report of the number of dogs and cats euthanized in your shelter, and you look at the number, the average days that they were in kennel before that decision was made, is it 7, is it 14? It kind of depends on your shelter, is it 30? Then that's your timeline, that's your maximum point where you actually have to move them out a little bit faster than that, or a lot of bit faster. You are gonna get a backlog if it takes you 60 days to get a dog or cat adopted, but you're making euthanasia decisions at 30 days. Does that make sense? It comes with not hoarding data. So I see this so often that a director of operations or maybe an adoption manager, or even if you're executive director, they're running reports. Hopefully that's the best practice. So if you're not doing that, you're going home and you've learned that this weekend to do it. And not just keep those numbers to yourselves. Like I've been in that position of just complete stress of like, oh gosh, I've got 20 dogs to move out, or this dog is now approaching 6 months or even a year in our shelter. What do I do? And I've made the mistake of just keeping that problem to myself. But what I've learned is that you are more powerful with numbers, more minds in the room to help you with these solutions. So meaning working with your foster coordinator, your foster team should know this, your marketing team, kennel team, everybody that's working at your organization should know euthanasia numbers, should know your live release goals. I've worked in an organization where I had no idea what our live release rate was every month. So just don't hoard that. Share it with the rest of your team, and then that'll bring the urgency that you need. And then setting tangible goals. I won't spend too much time on this because I know we've been talking about KPIs, the key performance indicators, and how to kind of measure success and push your team to work a little bit harder. But just an example. So if you're having trouble with an adoption team that seems to be a little bit like not having that sense of urgency that you would like, but you're still making decisions on euthanasia, or you want to help a shelter, but your adoptions are just sort of lagging, giving them an actual goal. So it's one thing to be like, we're trying to increase adoptions, and that sounds good and all, but if you have a goal, so like we want to get from 20 to 30 adoptions per week, that's our goal. You're going to have a team that has that goal in mind, and they're figuring out creative solutions to get to that number, but they really need to have a number versus just like, we're trying, and then it kind of ends there. All right, so market like crazy. I can't stress this enough, and this should be a checklist for you when you're thinking about who's in your care and who you're marketing. A lot of times we're thinking of just marketing our adoption list, but we have to be really critical about this. So even your euthanasia list, I'm doing a whole talk about that tomorrow morning, how to market that, because I know it's a delicate situation, but you want to be able to get that urgency out there without freaking people out. But we forget about like walking through the clinic. So cats or dogs that are stable, but maybe are on, they need sub-Q fluids or something. If a foster is interested in learning how to do that, would that then be a way that you could get that dog or cat out of your clinic? So we forget a lot of times of the cats and dogs that aren't on the adoption floor. If you have a surplus of puppies, allowing puppies to go to foster. So marketing them, and really the goal is, I'm a big fan of marketing everyone, but there's going to be a certain population that you're not really marketing. Maybe you're, puppies that are in, if you have a parvo ward, if they're on like an, IV fluids or something and they need around-the-clock care, that might be someone that you're not marketing out actively to adoption or foster. But what you're trying to do is increase the number that you're marketing and then decrease that number that is unavailable. So I hear this a lot, and I have felt it personally of, well, we just don't have enough fosters. I don't even know where to start. I don't have the adopters. And it seems so simple, like brutally simple, but just how you get there is marketing. So communicating who needs help brings people to help you. Seems very silly, but it's very simple. So marketing's number one. You don't have to do crazy foster orientations or have a ton of expertise, but just be willing to put your needs and put the faces out there. And then the hidden shelter. So that idea of we have an adoption floor that's like available for adoption, and then we've got this sort of behind the scenes, maybe it's a blocky-headed dog that's really jumpy mouthy, might be just not up for adoption, or maybe has done something. We're really bad, actually really crappy, at figuring out who wants pets, right? We don't know, like certain dogs or cats, like if you think about the ones that you're like, oh man, why are you still here? You know, there's a lot of those that you have in your care, but also ones you're like, oh gosh, no one's gonna foster, no one's gonna want to adopt you, and then all of a sudden someone comes out of the woodwork, or you have a lot of people that are wanting to adopt them. We never know. So the best strategy of that is just putting all the needs out there and let people step up. This is just an example from last week, a way to kind of just market this. It is a sensitive case. His name is Rumpus. It's a cute little name because he has a large mass growing, and he's a senior little dog, as you can kind of tell. And our clinic has basically have done a lot of exams on him and worked with him and realized that his mass is inoperable at this point, so he's really needing sort of a hospice situation. That could be a dog that would be a high euthanasia risk, because it's like, who's going to want him? He's sort of at the end of life, but he still is really spunky. He still has some good time left, probably more than 6 months, I'd say. This would be a dog originally that I would be like, who is going to want him? He kind of looks a little rough, and then within posting him, he found multiple fosters, and one picked him up the very next morning. So again, we're not really good at kind of predicting the future. Put your needs out there, let people help you. All right, and then making it easy to save lives. I know a lot of this doesn't seem like it's in your control, like, oh, well, we've always been closed on Sundays, or we're always closed on Mondays. But use your data to try to keep bringing this issue up with, even if you're not in control, bringing it up with leaders or the people that are the decision makers. This is actual hours of a shelter not far from here, 12 to 3, Monday through Saturday. They're closed on Sunday. When we look at, this is our data from Austin Pets Alive of our traffic. We're checking, we have people coming in, they're checking in through a system called WaitWhile, so then we can look at our data and see when are our highest traffic times, when do we need to really staff up the most, and when do we need our most volunteers. And you can see Sunday is our second busiest day. So why would we be closed on Sunday? That's when people are off, that's when they're free. So just making it more accessible, and when they do come, make it super easy. I think of like the post office near me, their hours are like 10 to 4, and I can never mail anything, and everything's late because they're always closed when I'm working. We also think about intake hours. So when are you bringing in pets? So if you've got overnight officers bringing in dogs, if you are accepting cats 7 days a week but not doing adoptions certain days, that's really going to backlog you, because think about, as easy as it is to bring a dog or cat into you, it should be just as easy, actually easier, to get them out. So thinking about balancing your RTOs, your adoption, your foster placements, your rescue pickups with the number of hours that you're open for intake. And then the adoption floor. I can't stress this enough. Everyone should be seen. Yes, I believe your stray animals, stray hold animals also should be seen. We are working in broken old shelters that have an old way of doing things, so it might be creative. You have to be creative about this. When you go to, if you've ever been to Austin Pets Alive, 200 dog kennels, 50 of them were the adoption floor once upon a time, and the other 150 were the stray kennels. And so to see like the way shelters were built with that kind of history behind it, we are just inherited that sort of bad model, so we've got to undo that. Rescues, fosters, adopters, when we talk about every second, every day counts, we can't start the clock when they've finished stray hold. Try to get a jump on it, especially if you're a high intake shelter or if you're dealing with just not enough kennels and you need to increase your live outcomes. So, Claire, how do you do that? How do you do that? Securing a safe placement. So some of our leading shelters in the country, a lot of them are here. Dallas with a 40,000 intake, 40,000 a year intake. Pima County, Austin Animal Center, all of our shelters that are really leading the way in life-saving on a bigger scale are adopting pets on stray hold. That is, and if you guys are doing it in the room, and I'm sorry if this is review, good for you, that's great. It's really, really the future of this. So just think about it. If a shelter with, a $40,000 a year intake can do it, certainly shelters at $2,000 can figure out the logistics around this. Having a live outcome just already lined up, again, they come in, you're starting the clock as soon as they get in. Here are a few examples of what it looks like. I've heard from a lot of different shelters, they've gotten really creative about this. No, it doesn't mean that that would be illegal to go home with the adopter like on day one of intake, a stray. That doesn't mean that. It just means that they're getting placed on a hold. The way it looks like in some shelters, they've done it a few different ways. An adopter will pay a donation. So if the adoption fee is $100, they will put a $50 donation down. If the owner doesn't reclaim in that time, then the adopter will then finalize the adoption, and then that $50 is just going to go to the $100 adoption fee, so then they just pay another $50. Does that make sense? So paying a donation towards the adoption fee. Again, waiting till if an owner reclaims, then the adoption, shelters have done it a couple ways. The adoption just gets absorbed into the organization, or it can be put to another pet, or sometimes even credited back. The other way that organizations do that, the adopter comes in, wants to adopt a cat or dog on stray hold, the adopter will do a full adoption. They sign the contract, they pay the full adoption fee, they're going to sign part of the contract that says, I understand that if an owner comes forward in the next 3 days or however long the stray hold is, that I have no rights essentially to that. But after the stray hold, then the dog or cat can get spayed and neutered and then go home with this new adopter. If the owner does come forward, so if there is a reclaim that happens, then that adoption fee, I've seen it where it gets credited back to the adopter. They can put it towards another dog or cat, or they get it fully refunded. The refund thing would probably make your government kind of lose their minds a little bit, but if there's a way to do it, that has worked really well in other shelters. If there's no workarounds with that transaction of money, other shelters have done it where the pets on stray hold can be seen, an adopter comes in, they can do a form essentially that's saying, I'm interested. I've seen one shelter, it's pretty cool. They'll actually set up for some of your ones that have multiple adopters, I won't say highly desirable, but you guys know what I'm talking about. Poodle puppy comes in and everyone's freaking out. They'll track that adoption interest and then have 3 people in line essentially. So that first person in line understands when they put their interest down that they have 24 hours to then finalize the adoption if the owner doesn't come forward. If that person doesn't come forward, they go to number 2 and then to number 3. So no money is happening in that situation. You could ask for a donation, I guess, but it's just a way to track interest. Allowing rescue tags, so allowing rescues to put tags on dogs and cats that are still on stray hold, and then of course foster interest too. So the way we usually run it is whoever can get them out of here fastest is the winner. So an adopter comes forward, then dog or cat will get adopted, and then rescue and foster from there. These are some kennel cards. The bottom one is from Pima Animal Care. So a dog that came in on stray hold has a reprint on the kennel card as adopted. So other potential adopters know that dog already has somebody lined up. And then one on the top is just from Austin Animal Center. Both use Chameleon. You can see just a little sticker on there. So again, sorry if it's review. If you're already doing it, good on you for doing it. But if you're not doing it, try to get creative and really try to push and talk to the decision makers in your community on how you can get this done. All right, this is super simple, little spreadsheet, and you guys probably have better ways, but creating, it's old school, a rescue or foster Rolodex, a little cheat sheet for you. When that incontinent bulldog comes in, or the husky that has some eye issues, think about your breed-specific organizations, breed-specific rescues. They specialize in those breeds. Dachshunds that have back issues. Make sure that you've got a list so you can reach out to them proactively, like day 2 of stray hold or day 1 they came in. Hey, Sandy Sue, this would be a potential foster, really good with our lap sharks. She's just an example, not a real person. And if she's really good with those sassy small dogs and you have one that your team's having trouble managing or handling, then maybe we reach out to Sandy Sue to come forward. And then you can do, again, this is an example kind of spreadsheet for you, and you can fill out any category that you think would be helpful. Another category that you could add onto this after notes is who she has in care already. If you don't use your software to be able to do this, like proactive lists. We're old school at APA. We'll just use a good old-fashioned spreadsheet to be able to track some of this. That way we're proactively reaching out and not waiting for someone to come forward. All right. If you were in Dr. Jefferson and Dr. Segerson's dog presentation, this will kind of be review for you, but looking at your checkpoint protocol. So establishing a timeline that if a dog or cat comes in and they've been here for 3 days, that they absolutely have a photo, they have a bio on the website. So upon intake, get the vaccines done. If you're going to do preventatives, deworm, or even microchip, do it then. That way you don't have to, like, the more times that you have to go get that dog or cat out of the kennel, take him to the clinic, or get somebody, a tech, to go out and do it, again, it's more time, and then that dog and cat is closer to be out the door. Within 24 hours, everyone should have a picture and info online, whether you use Shelter Love, Pet Point, Chameleon, get that dog or cat online. I'm a big believer on figuring out a system that within 48 hours, you're kind of doing a census of who has bad photos. If you haven't done this, definitely start doing it. This is an example of Ashton, who was just saved a couple weeks ago in San Antonio's euthanasia list. Top photo is intake. It's not the worst, but definitely not the best. But once you get him out of the shelter, again, this is just an iPhone picture, you can just see how cute he is, or just out of the kennel, rather. And then he has a much better chance of getting tagged by rescue, foster, or getting adopted. And then within 72 hours, depending on what your timeline is, so if you're making, if you've got a really short length of stay, 5-7 days usually is like the average, that's pretty fast. Then within 72 hours, you want to make sure that you're doing that proactive outreach, you're checking off your boxes, I've done all these things. You're doing, if you have euthanasia lists, that urgent marketing is going out. You're sending out all your dogs and cats that are at risk. You might have a tiered system where if they've been here X number of days, their adoption fee is going to drop. So usually we're 80. If they've been here, 3-4 days, then it's going to drop down to 25. And then at 5 days, so if you're not in this sort of like kind of turn and burn situation of high euthanasia, thinking about field trips or sleepover, foster push, and then if you have a main Facebook page, that's probably where a lot of your audience is, or Instagram, making sure that they get a highlight piece on that or put them on the social media rotation schedule. All right, the medical clinic, or the anything medical. This seems to be one of the biggest areas where we have a lot of our holdups. So I'm going to spend a little time here. Spay-neuter backlog. I've heard this is as long as 2 weeks, a month. We're really backlogged on getting spay-neuter. So the calculation, Dr. J's gone over this, but your daily spay-neuter number, so how many, or even think about it as a week, how many dogs and cats that you can get spayed and neutered in a week should equal the daily intake of dogs and cats that you're bringing into your shelter that are unaltered. That's if you're being responsible for all the animals leaving your shelter getting unaltered. Another way around this is pre-adopt system. It might not be for everyone, but it is a way. At APA, we take deposits, $100 deposit that's refundable once they come back for surgery, because we are also backlogged. And then we schedule an appointment. Never ever recommend someone or don't make them come to you and email you to schedule an appointment. I believe it's not because people don't want to get their pets altered. It's just we're busy, and I know that my vet needs to text me for me to like stay up on things. So people are the same way. You get busy. There's other priorities out there. So we schedule the appointment. So pre-adopt might be a system, but if your shelter would say no to that, you do have to have somebody like really making sure that people are coming back and tracking that list so it doesn't get away from you. But that's been a way to kind of combat that issue. Before busy adoption weekend, so clear the shelter, I think we do this, but do you think about holiday weekends or look back historically at your adoption data from last year and see when was your peak time in adoptions and start kind of getting ready for that. So what can you do to fully work up those dogs and cats that you know have a really high chance of getting adopted? Try to get ahead of it if you can. Make sure that they've got all their preventatives, heartworm testing's all done, and then spayed and neutered if you can do it. And then so we call them green sleeve, they're ready to go, same day, get them out. This is a big holdup for us. Ringworm, heartworm treatment. Met a lot of shelters that are treating for heartworms in the shelter, and we all know how long that can be when you add the crate rest on top of that. Plus the shelter isn't a great place to do your kennel or crate rest, but that then just added 4 weeks on their time in shelter. No bueno, get rid of that. Ringworm, this is a big one. So we have a whole ringworm adoption center. You can see our funny fungus fighters. We try to make fun of it, and we waive their fees a lot, but letting them, if we can trust a foster to take them home and to do the treatment, and the treatment is pretty simple, Lyme dip, terbinafine, if we can trust a foster to do that, then we should be able to trust an adopter and give them the tools. But what about liability and people, their kids getting ringworm? We do have a ringworm waiver. I can share it with you guys if you're interested. And we do education. At the end of the day, we put the responsibility on people. Monica, my cohort on the cat, says you're grown-ass adults, and I love that. It's true. You're a grown-ass adult. We're going to trust you to make a good decision for your family. It's our job to give you education. So we will talk if you're immune compromised at home or anything like that. We're going to steer you a different direction. But for someone who's not freaked out by a little fungus, we're going to let them go home. You guys know ringworm can take like 6-8 weeks sometimes in shelter to cure up. By having this method alone in Austin, we've been able to adopt out. Last year was about 500 active ringworm cases were in a home. We were able then not only to be able to save 100% of APA's ringworm kitties, but also from surrounding counties where they're, Woods Lamp positive is a death sentence in a lot of shelters. Let's stop scaring our adopters and fosters. It is hard to be an adoption counselor because not only you have to be really good at customer service, but you kind of have to be a mini medical specialist. You've got to know how to talk about post-parvo and heartworm treatment and things that are constantly changing with FVLV and FIV. So one of the best ways that we've kind of figured out is you can do trainings, but having a one-page, just easy to read FAQ, it's something that could go home with adopters, but also something that's really helpful for your staff to be trained on. And as things are changing, you need to edit that too. So we have stopped testing for FIV, for example. We've got to then go and update our FIV document and have a position statement. This is how we talk about it so the public isn't freaked out. Heartworm, mange, we talk about that. So what's the difference between Sarcops and Demodex? Fosters don't need to freak out, and then FELV. So there's a lot of misconceptions about that. So anything that you are thinking about in your organization where you feel like, ooh, you heard a staff member or a volunteer say something, you're like, that's not right, or you're getting a lot of questions like from your new staff or new volunteers, like what's the difference between the mange and what's heartworm treatment and what do I tell adopters? Anything that you're getting repeated questions, start writing a quick FAQ if you need any of them. We have some that I can share. Just a real good info sheet so that your staff isn't scaring away adopters. And then crowdfunding. We see a lot of holdups in medical procedures because of just diagnostic unknowns, or we don't know how to talk to an adopter, or what's the plan to go home. But also just lack of funds and resources. So if you've got a sort of a complicated case, don't be afraid to just put your needs out there, do little medical chip-ins. Facebook is great for that, and then raise the money that you need so you can move them out faster. All right, rescue partners. So this is a tough one because I think everyone in the room can relate of a shelter that has been really bad to work with, or a rescue you just despise and you don't agree with. Does everyone have that feeling? Yes, yeah. So I feel you, I have had to talk to a lot of organizations, and I've been kind of doing like an unofficial just sort of poll with people, and some of the things I've heard from the rescue side is, well, the shelter's really hard to work with and they don't want our help. And then from the shelter side, the rescues aren't doing anything for us, and they're bashing us on social media. So at some point we just have to bury the hatchet and just talk to each other. It's not easy, but for the good of the animals in our community, we've got to be able to like sit down at a table and just hash it out. Regular meetings and check-ins, so listening to each other, listening to where we're struggling. One shelter rescue partnership that we just kind of helped facilitate, a shelter was feeling like a rescue organization that's been there for about 70 years had a lot of potential to be able to help them, and it took a couple meetings to just sit down and be like, let's set a number that you could pull from us, and we can count on you to pull X number of dogs and cats every month to be able to move them out faster, something that you can count on. And then this is where we see holdups too with rescue timelines, and I get it. It's hard to find a foster, but we can't treat our shelters they're trying to get their live release up. We can't treat them as a boarding facility, so we've got to move them out faster. And it's not that the shelter's trying to be a jerk. It's just because they've got this pressure of dogs and cats coming in every day, so it's like, we need pickup tomorrow. There's no real nice way to say that, but when you have that urgent timeline, it doesn't mean you're being mean. It's just try to understand that it's because of the rapid flow through. So this is just an example of a policy that we put in place in San Antonio. Of course, there's exceptions here or there that we're going to work on, but rescues must have pickup within 24 hours. So if you put a tag on them, they get spayed and neutered, it's probably more like sort of like 36 hours probably is when they're going to pick up, then be ready. Have that foster ready, have a boarding spot ready, because you know that once surgery happens, they have to get picked up within 24 hours. There were partners that, their model was pleading for fosters for dogs in order to save them. They might not be a great fit for like pulling off an urgent list, because if they need 2 weeks or something to really secure placement, we tried to be upfront as possible on expectations of like, if you're going to partner with us because of our high intake, this is what we require. It is sort of a pain point, and it has been kind of an issue of like, we just need more time and you're just being a jerk. So just trying to find a middle ground to that. And then transport. So if any of you guys are doing any sort of transport, it's wonderful. But if you have transport tags, like they already have a safe placement, it's just a matter of going on transport or getting a health certificate. Don't let them just sit in your kennels and take up space. We see this all the time. They have to go to foster. Try to make a goal. We had a goal for us, 48 hours. No dog that was tagged for transport could be in our kennel. They have to go to foster. We had a partnership also with a boarding facility. So even if it's 1 or 2 kennels, they donate to you for free. That might be something to think about too, to move them out. We see this being a big kind of backlog with space in a lot of organizations. All right, so a little bit about behavior. Our little friend there, you can see that's the same dog. It's hard to believe. You've heard this a little bit, but stop relying on the standardized behavior assessments. I will go to my grave saying this. And it's very confusing because we were all taught this. And what I'm saying is SAFERS, the match-up 2, the put them in the room, and the food bowl, and all the fake hand testing. It had good intentions to start, but it really became a live or die test for a lot of shelters, because we want to figure out, oh gosh, I've got to make 20 kennels. Okay, I can put this test in place, and I have an easier like good dog, bad dog situation. But we all know dogs. It's not as cut and dry as that. You're also getting just a snapshot. So a lot of people will kind of the argument for doing these standardized tests is that it's a liability thing. Well, we don't want to adopt out a dog that has resource guarding or has aggression, but you're just getting a snapshot of them on day 1 usually, and that's when they're the most stressed. So you guys all know small dogs like this, that you get them out of the kennel like they were growling and snapping, and they can't move in that stainless steel situation, so it's a fight or flight and they're just defending themselves. But a lot of the dogs, when you pull them out of there, it's insane. Within minutes, they start turning around. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer. But we have worked with a few shelters that they're doing these tests. And so it's okay that if you're working, I'm not saying don't do any sort of assessment or behavior modification, but it was basically like a requirement to get on the adoption floor. You have to pass this test. I have worked with a shelter that is literally 30 days behind. So dogs are sitting for 30 days. They're trying to get their live release rate up from 75 to 80%. And because all their time is spent trying to get this list down. But in 30 days, you probably have a good idea of how that dog is before you even have to do this standardized behavior assessment. So really challenging yourself. And when others are dying for lack of space, you got to be the most efficient on time. And it's been proven to be an unreliable predictor. I always think it's interesting with the SAFER test that ASPCA created. They've come out and they're not certifying any more assessors anymore. So the organization that created this assessment piece isn't even standing behind it anymore, and they're going to more ongoing assessments. So we've got to challenge ourselves and stay up with what's going on in the current research. It's a better use of your resources. It takes a lot of time to leave a dog in a room and do the hug test and all of those tests. It's a better use of your very valuable time to spend it with pre- and post-adoption support. One article I'd recommend, if you just Google it, you'll find it, but is this dog dangerous? Shelters struggle with live or die tests. A really good kind of perspective around that. And if you guys aren't doing this, good. Keep going that way. So I think we've talked about let's get rid of this behavior assessment, but what do we do instead? And it doesn't mean that we just blindly adopt and foster out dogs. So we're a huge believer in ongoing assessments. The way it looks in practice is thinking about it that the day the dog comes in, and even before they come in, the day the cat comes in, even before if they were at another shelter or with an owner, that is their assessment. Every day, every minute is a new assessment, a new chance to learn something about them, because we know personalities like that little dog in the last slide, things are changing. And then using multiple sources. So these are some of the most common sources of information. You guys have the information at your fingertips, but it's just hard to get that into all these sort of places where you're getting info, but putting that into a shelter software, and even better, using it to help make placements. So you're not just looking at someone when they're like, tell me about Rufus, and you're like, he's a 2-year-old boxer that came in, yesterday. When you have nothing more to say, that's really hard to get safe placement. Different things, so intake, your intake team that's doing vaccinations, can they put little notes in your shelter software about friendly, was giving me kisses while vaccinating, or a little bit defensive, like had to muzzle. That's just a piece of it, but at least it's a little bit of information. Playgroup notes, owner surrender forms, return forms. Don't let someone leave with that half filled out or not asking a few more questions if they just wrote aggressive. Try to tool your form so you're getting a little bit more information. It's not just like, I've got nothing. If this person had their cat in their home for 3 years, you better be getting a lot of information from them. Our most valuable is foster feedback. So sleepover programs, make sure that that form that they fill out, that feedback doesn't get like tossed or put in a paper file somewhere. It's getting into your shelter software. Field trip notes. Volunteer dog walkers. This is really exciting. A lot of people are just using Google Forms these days. You can make it like a quick 5-question. I'm a big fan of this. 5-question, like what was your experience today? What did Rufus like when he went out? How was he in the kennel? How was he out of the kennel? So getting your volunteers to put that in a Google form, and then it'll export into a spreadsheet for you. You might have different ways, like paper logs, but anything you can do to just make sure it gets into your software. Daily care and rounds, anything that's from a previous shelter, if you've got notes. And then if you are lucky enough to have volunteers or staff doing any sort of behavior work or any training, make sure that those notes come in. The idea of that is then some dogs will have, or some cats even will have 8 to 10 pages if you're doing it right, hopefully. If they've been with you a while, sometimes they're gonna have a lot of memos there, but the idea is having a way to consolidate that into a little easy cheat sheet for your adoption counselors or whoever's doing your adoptions to be able to talk to adopters. So the more you know, the faster you can move them out. All right, and then won't spend too much time on this, but very common roadblocks that exist with behavior. You don't have to be a trainer or a behavior specialist to be able to create a behavior plan. I think that's really important. I always felt that, well, I don't have a trainer, I don't have money for that, so I don't know what to do. I will take it from our APA behavior team. It's not as intense as you think. One of the main common things that we see is the high energy plus kennel stress. That's been the cause of a lot of just naughty behaviors that we see. The goal for that is increasing out of kennel time, and that's huge. So I'll go through a few ways. Of course, foster please number one. So if you're trying to create a behavior plan, try to move them into foster where you're kind of eliminating that stress. Increasing volunteer dog walkers. So one of the things that we see, and I said add gear on there or add equipment, a lot of like 80-pound, really large, hard to handle dog and your 70-year-old volunteer is getting pulled over. What can you do if you are just using a slip leash, maybe a martingale or an easy walk harness or a sturdier clip leash? Just adding a little bit of equipment to help them might be able to increase your bandwidth of how many people can handle that dog. Productive outings, big fan of this. This is more dog focused, but if you are out, your volunteers and staff, like even put it in a job description. If they're out in a yard with a dog, the expectation is you're not hanging out on Instagram or on Facebook, that you're interacting with the dog, because if they're only getting that 30 minutes or 20-minute outing, don't let them just sniff around and go to the bathroom. Start working their mind, teaching them things, play fetch if they love it, teaching them sit, down, making it a productive outing if you don't only have that much time. And then there's some training programs like our CGC or Canine Good Citizen, the Cat Positive training program, or implementing or starting a volunteer cat behavior enrichment team. So different things that you can put in place. Thinking about rotating to as an office dog or an office cat, featuring a pet of the week, or also thinking about kennel placement. If it's really like a stressful area or their neighbors are really, they're talking a lot of smack, maybe rotating them in the kennel so they'll just show a little bit better. One of my favorite things that I've really seen work is we're always like, the first one is like, okay, like we can't find a foster. It seems so easy, like just find a foster. And you're like, but what if no one shows up? I think that's a big stretch, right? Especially a dog that has behavior challenges to all of a sudden find a foster for this undetermined amount of time till they get adopted. So one kind of easy step you can take, of course, sleepover fosters. But even before that, even if you can't find a sleepover foster, just put a post out. If you have a closed like Facebook page for your volunteers, or an email blast and just ask your volunteers, okay, can someone come and see Rufus? He's really struggling in his kennel. We need to give him a little bit of extra love. And then hopefully by people just putting him on a radar, making him sort of a favorite dog, they'll start taking him out more. They'll form a connection. Then maybe that will lead to a field trip. Maybe that'll be a weekend sleepover, and then maybe there'll be a permanent foster and we'll find an adopter. So don't feel like you just gotta find the foster right away. Just ask for the little things. Can someone just give them some extra attention? All right, and then virtual foster, one of my favorite programs. I think it's one of the easiest things to implement. Super helpful when you're dealing with a longer length of stay, but even if you've got, like, you're just trying to increase flow through, you're only one person. So creating an army of volunteers that can help you and be advocates for the dogs and cats in your care. The essential idea of this is that they can't take them home, but they're providing the same level of support that a foster parent would, a traditional foster parent would, minus that take-home part. So yes, we think about this for helping our long length of stay, but if you've got a dog where you need to move them out at 7 days, maybe the virtual fosters work on your 5 to 7 day guys, you know, like at that end of the time where they really need help. They're not just going to turn and get adopted. Things that virtual fosters can do, ensure the marketing is up to date. They are taking fresh photos. They're adding videos. Videos are huge. Updating their bio so it's positive only and not full of stop signs. They're providing extra outings. They're coming over on a Wednesday and adding a little enrichment, maybe doing some out-of-kennel enrichment, some scent work, some agility stuff. They're providing extra training so the dog has some actual life skills to go home with. They're knowledgeable about a medical plan, so they're able to talk about a FeLV kitty if you have a virtual foster for cats. They're able to intelligently talk to adopters about that. They are now, you've got an army of people that are advertising to their friends, their family, their business, people at work. So just like a foster would be marketing their own foster, these people are doing it for the dogs and cats in your care. And then point of contact, so they're helping with the adoption process. If your adoption is a little bit kind of crazy and hard to navigate and there's a lot of dogs and cats, they can be more of like a personal liaison or assistant through that process. And then they can also help. I know your teams get really, really busy, but to actually facilitate a meet and greet. So then the adoption counselors can take over. It's like, you know, here we go. They said yes. We already did the meet and greet and all that time. And then one of the most valuable things that we never think about is they can provide us and save staff time on all those post-adoption questions that we get. We've had virtual fosters go to adopters' homes at 12 at night because the dog wouldn't go up the stairs. We don't have the ability to do that and to provide that support. They're answering easy questions. What are they eating? What do they know? Those are all taking time away from what we need to do every day. So you're building your team of people that can help you. Love this program. You can get a volunteer to kind of oversee it. Just have a simple spreadsheet to kind of track who's a virtual foster. I already have a one-page FAQ for you. So if you need that, let me know. And you can roll it out hopefully when you get home. All right. Last piece, we are going to talk a lot more about this in our last session, so I won't go into it too much. But so you get them to the adoption, you get them to foster, but then you've got all these hoops to jump through. So Mary during lunch was talking about her experience trying to adopt a pug, right? And if Mary's going through all these checks, think about what we're putting other people through. Here are things that are common barriers that we all see, and it doesn't mean I'm not sitting here on my high horse at APA. We're constantly evaluating how we can improve too, and what are our barriers to adoption and how we can eliminate them. So everyone can benefit from evaluating your process. Home checks, getting rid of those, vet and landlord checks, an unfriendly environment. Do people come in and the first impression they get is dogs are that way, cats are that way, don't put your fingers in the kennel. Like that barking, that's not a good first experience. Unfriendly environment. Long wait times, that's one of ours at APA. We're working on how do we decrease our wait time so that it's not taking 2 hours, on someone's precious Saturday to just take a dog or cat home. And then not same day placement. You want, people are coming, they kind of want that instant gratification, they want to take the pet home today. And then we're relying so heavily on applications versus just talking to people. It's not a pass-fail anymore, getting rid of that whole mentality and just getting to know adopters and just having a healthy, people are innately good and that we're going to try to have the best conversation, make the best match for you. I love the saying, like, screen them in, not out. We're not trying to screen people out. Restricted blanket policies, we'll talk a little bit more about this at our 5 o'clock adoption workshop, but these are common ones. We never place dogs into primarily outdoor-only homes. That would be a blanket policy. It's not case by case. You've now shut out a segment of adopters that could be really valuable for you. We never allow adoptions as gifts. That's another blanket policy. And we require an experienced person to foster or adopt certain dogs and cats. And some of our best fosters and adopters are green, and they're trainable, and we can help them, and they're open to that. Always question this. I'm like, so crazy. Question everything. It's true. Where did these policies come from? Was it someone's bad experience 6 years ago and it just sort of trickled on and everyone's been trained that way? It's much better to approach adoptions and placement as a case by case versus having all these barriers and all these hoops to jump through. And lastly, sustaining your fast flow through, trying to figure out who's in charge of tracking your flow. Is someone pulling a report every day or every week, kind of looking at where dogs and cats are in the system and who needs what? When I talked about those checklists, so intake, what happens at 2 days, what happens at 3 days, who is tracking that? So figuring that out for your organization. Holding team meetings, so different departments are coming together. If you're a big organization, you have a clinic and marketing and foster, and just having it out, hash it out. Let's be honest, like we've had organizations for years, like literally for 20 years have had a backlog in spay-neuter, and that has crippled how much they can help their city because they can't move animals fast enough because their clinic system is broken. That hopefully can be solved. It's not gonna be easy in a day, but if we don't bring it up in these department meetings, then we're never gonna make any progress. And then, of course, evaluate a process. We're not above this. Even if you just did it, a month ago, things will slip and things pop up and challenges happen. So you have to continuously evaluate every week even what are the pain points now? What challenges do we have to solve? And knowing that we can always improve. But don't forget this, the main point is it's a race against the clock, truly. And every second counts. And the ultimate goal is just make it easy and simple for your community to save lives. And this is my email. When I'm not teaching, I'm answering all of your questions and providing post-adoption support and all of that good stuff and helping with my people that have come through apprenticeships. So don't be shy. Email me if you needed any of these documents or even these slides. I can give it to you. So thank you. And I'll be up here after if you guys have any questions.